Hey viewers! Hope you're all doing great. Before I start the story, tell me in the comments which country you're watching from and what time it is there. And if you enjoy my videos, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Imagine for a moment a world without clear sight. A world where the blurred outlines of distant trees, the indistinct faces of loved ones, and the faint shimmer of stars above the desert horizon were all seen through a softened haze. This was the world that most of humanity lived in for thousands of years. Welcome to Why Ancient Civilizations Never Invented Glasses. The story you are about to hear unfolds over the long arc of human civilization, from Mesopotamia's first glass beads to the silent monasteries of medieval Europe, revealing why, despite remarkable achievements in mathematics, astronomy, and art, the ancients never created something as seemingly simple as a pair of spectacles. Before we begin, let us understand the quiet history of the word glasses. The term itself is rooted in the Old English glaze, meaning transparent substance, derived from the Latin vitrum. Yet, while the material was known to humans as early as 2500 BCE, its use was decorative, not optical. The concept of using transparent material to bend light, to improve sight, was an idea that would not come for millennia. The first humans to create glass were not scientists but artisans. Around 3500 BCE, in ancient Mesopotamia and Egypt, glass was born accidentally in the high heat of ceramic furnaces. Archaeologists have uncovered small beads, opaque, colorful, and imperfect, used for jewelry or ceremonial purposes. No one yet imagined that this shimmering material could correct vision. For them, glass was magic, a frozen droplet of the sun. Egyptians mastered the art of glassmaking around 1500 BCE. They used it to craft amulets, small containers, and decorative inlays. Yet, their glass was cloudy, filled with impurities, and far from transparent. It could not serve any optical purpose. In their temples, priests and scholars gazed at the heavens, charting stars and aligning pyramids with celestial events. Their precision was astonishing, but achieved without clear lenses. They relied instead on naked eyes and mathematical intuition. The very idea of enhancing vision mechanically did not exist in their worldview. To understand why glasses were never invented, we must look at how ancient civilizations understood vision itself. For the Greeks, seeing was not about light entering the eye. It was about the eye sending out beams. This theory, known as the emission theory of vision, was supported by great minds like Plato and Euclid. They believed that vision occurred because rays of light emanated from the eyes and touched objects. If light came from the eyes, then why would one need an instrument to help light enter them? This philosophical misunderstanding delayed optical discovery for centuries. Aristotle, in the 4th century BCE, proposed that the eyes perceived color through a transparent medium, air or water, but still did not consider lenses. The idea that a curved piece of glass could bend light was far beyond their perception of nature. In Greece, intellect was valued over experimentation. Scholars debated endlessly but rarely tested with their hands. The notion of an optical aid was not only absent, it was unnecessary within their conceptual universe. By the time of the Roman Empire, around the 1st century CE, glassmaking had advanced dramatically. The invention of glassblowing allowed artisans to make clearer, thinner, more uniform glass. Romans even built windows, translucent sheets that let light in while keeping wind out. And yet, still no glasses. There are records of Emperor Nero watching gladiatorial games through a polished emerald. Some historians believe this was to protect his eyes from the sun's glare. Others say it was mere vanity. Whatever the reason, it was not vision correction. Roman philosophers like Seneca mentioned that reading could be improved by viewing letters through a glass globe of water, an accidental discovery of magnification. Yet even this was treated as a curiosity, not a practical invention. Why? Because craftsmanship and science were separate worlds. The artisans who blew glass were slaves or low-status workers. The philosophers who studied optics were noblemen. The two rarely met. Knowledge was fragmented, beautiful but broken. Far from Rome, in the empires of the East, glass was also known but differently understood. In ancient China, Craftsmen created translucent jade, bronze mirrors, and crystal ornaments. The Chinese valued reflection more than refraction. Mirrors symbolized truth and moral clarity. Magnifying glasswork held no cultural value. They used polished bronze to study their faces and burned holes in parchment with convex crystals. Yet the idea of improving human eyesight never arose. In India, great scholars like Aryabhata and Varahamihira explored astronomy with intricate mathematics. They measured planetary orbits, predicted eclipses, and built observatories. But the concept of the lens as a visual aid did not exist in Sanskrit texts. They understood refraction through water, how a stick appeared bent in a pond, but it remained a philosophical wonder, not a tool for human use. By the end of the ancient era, humans had mastered geometry, built pyramids aligned with the stars, constructed aqueducts that ran for miles, and sculpted the human form in marble perfection. And yet, when an elderly scholar's eyes dimmed, there was nothing to help him read his scrolls. In candlelight he squinted. In sunlight, he held his manuscript closer, then farther away. There was no invention for his failing sight, only patience, resignation, and memory. It is almost poetic. How civilizations capable of shaping the world could not yet shape light. This was the age before optics, before the bending of light became a science. In the next batch, we will step into the forgotten centuries, where monks, scholars, and Islamic scientists began to rediscover what the ancients had missed. The candles flicker inside a quiet monastery. Outside, the world sleeps beneath a veil of mist. Inside, a monk bends over an ancient manuscript, tracing the faded words with trembling fingers. His eyesight, worn by years of study and prayer, fails him now. He sighs softly, unaware that he lives on the very edge of a forgotten revolution, the rebirth of human vision. Let us return for a moment to the turning point between the ancient world and the medieval age. After the age of Aristotle and Euclid, a lesser-known but remarkable thinker emerged. Hero of Alexandria, around the 1st century CE. Hero wrote about mirrors, reflections, and the behavior of light. He noticed that light traveled in straight lines and always took the shortest path, an early echo of the principles that would later shape physics. But Hero, too, did not imagine bending light through glass for sight. His experiments stayed theoretical. It was only later, around the 2nd century CE, that a man named Claudius Ptolemy in Alexandria made the first known quantitative study of refraction. He carefully recorded how light bent when passing through air and water. Ptolemy even experimented with transparent materials, noting angles and distortions. He came close, so very close, to the discovery that would change the world. But his aim was not vision correction. It was astronomy. He sought to understand the heavens, not the human eye. Thus, once again, the potential of optical science slipped quietly into obscurity. When Rome fell in the 5th century, its libraries burned. Scrolls crumbled, statues shattered, and scholars scattered. Europe entered an age that history would later call the Dark Ages. In this long silence, the fragile thread of optical knowledge nearly vanished. Glassmaking declined. Windows darkened. The art of creating transparent glass was almost forgotten. Yet knowledge does not die easily, it drifts. It floated eastward, carried by traders, monks, and travelers into Persia and the lands of Islam. There, in the warm cities of Baghdad, Cairo, and Cordoba, ancient Greek and Roman texts found new life. Translators and scientists preserved them, studied them, and added their own brilliance. This transfer, known as the translation movement, would become the hidden bridge between the ancient and modern worlds. In the 10th and 11th centuries, the Islamic world became the cradle of scientific rebirth. Scholars like Al-Kindi, Ibn Sahl, and most famously, Ibn al-Haytham, known in Latin as Alhazen, revolutionized our understanding of light and vision. Ibn al-Haytham, born around 965 CE in Basra, Iraq, was the first to truly explain how we see. He disproved the Greek emission theory by performing experiments in darkness and using carefully designed holes and lenses. In his monumental book of optics, he proposed that vision occurs when light enters the eye, not when it leaves it. He studied reflection, refraction, and even how curved glass could magnify objects. He wrote, "If the surface of transparent material is curved, it brings distant objects nearer." It was a quiet prophecy of the lens, centuries before spectacles would appear. Yet despite his knowledge, the idea of wearing such curved glass for personal vision correction did not emerge. Why? Because in his world science served philosophy and religion. He studied the laws of light, not its practical use for daily life. The tools to grind precise, clear glass lenses were rare, and even if created, the notion of placing them before the eye would have seemed odd, perhaps even unnatural. Before spectacles, humans still found creative ways to see better. They used what nature offered: clear quartz crystals, polished stones, and water-filled globes. Archaeologists have discovered a mysterious object in Assyria known as the Nimrud lens, dating to around 750 BCE. Made of rock crystal, it may have served as a magnifying tool or for starting fires. The Vikings, too, are said to have used pieces of Icelandic spar, a natural crystal, to navigate using polarized light. Though not for vision correction, these materials show humanity's growing fascination with clarity and light. By the time of the Islamic Golden Age, scholars sometimes used reading stones, hemispherical glass domes placed directly on manuscripts to enlarge letters. This was the earliest form of magnification used by aging monks and scribes. The reading stone was the ancestor of the eyeglass, close yet distant. It stayed on the table, not on the face. It might seem astonishing that so many civilizations, from the Greeks to the Arabs, came near the edge of invention but never crossed it. The reason lies not in ignorance, but in priorities. Ancient people sought knowledge to understand the cosmos, not to improve the human condition. They built temples to gods, not tools for the aging eye. Their glass was precious, difficult to shape, and full of imperfections. Grinding a small, precise lens required not only skill but purpose, and the concept of correcting vision simply did not exist as a personal right or need. When an elder's sight failed, it was accepted as a natural decline. Vision loss was a metaphor for wisdom, not weakness. In Greek tragedies, the blind often saw truth more clearly than the sighted. Think of Oedipus or Tiresias. So, to wear artificial eyes might even have seemed to defy nature or fate. This deep philosophical outlook, combined with a lack of technical skill, delayed the creation of eyeglasses for nearly 2,000 years. But the story does not end here. From the dim libraries of medieval monks to the workshops of Venetian glassmakers, a quiet spark was forming. In the next batch, we'll cross into the misty monasteries of Europe, where the first true lenses would emerge, and where the human desire to see clearly would finally take shape. The air inside a medieval scriptorium was thick with the smell of parchment and melted wax. Rows of monks sat in silence, copying sacred texts, letter by letter, hour after hour. The only sounds were the gentle scratching of quills and the soft hiss of oil lamps. For centuries, these monks were the guardians of human knowledge. They preserved what was left of ancient wisdom: Aristotle's logic, Ptolemy's stars, and the words of early saints. But as they grew older, their eyes tired. The pages blurred. Letters bled into one another. And so, the story of sight entered a new age. An age when the human need to see clearly would finally find its form. In the early Middle Ages, reading was a sacred act. Books were rare treasures, hand-copied and bound in leather. To read was not merely to learn, it was to commune with God. Yet, for monks who spent their lives in prayer and transcription, fading eyesight was a quiet torment. The dim light of the cloister made it worse. Imagine an elderly scribe, bent over his manuscript, whispering the words he could barely see. He would lift a small glass hemisphere, a reading stone, and place it over the words. The letters swelled slightly, easier to see. This simple dome of glass, polished from crystal or blown and ground into shape, was the earliest form of magnification used in Europe around the 10th century. Still, it rested flat on the page. It magnified but did not correct vision. The true leap from tool to wearable had not yet come. To understand how humanity finally began to bend glass for the eye, we must travel to Venice, the glittering city of canals and artisans. By the 11th century, Venetian glassmakers had mastered the art of purity. On the nearby island of Murano, they learned to produce exceptionally clear glass, almost free from bubbles or color. They called it cristallo. This new clarity changed everything. Venetian workshops became laboratories of light, where craftsmen, though not scholars, experimented with the shapes of glass. They discovered that curved surfaces could enlarge images, just as Alhazen had written centuries earlier. But Venice was a city of trade, not science. Its glassmakers guarded their methods as secrets, passed from father to son, sealed behind the furnaces of Murano. Still, through these hands, the material that would one day form spectacles was being born. Around the 13th century, something extraordinary began to appear across Europe. Convex glass discs that could enlarge writing when held at a certain distance. Historians debate exactly where and when the first wearable lenses were made. Some say Pisa or Florence. Others credit Venice itself. The earliest written mention of spectacles comes from 1286 CE, when a Dominican friar named Giordano de Pisa preached a sermon in which he said, "It is not yet 20 years since the art of making spectacles was discovered." That puts the invention around 1260 to 1270 CE. Nearly 3,000 years after the first glass beads of Mesopotamia. The first lenses were simple convex shapes, designed to aid the far-sighted, those whose aging eyes could no longer focus on near objects. They were mounted in frames of bone, metal, or leather and held by hand or balanced on the nose. They did not have temples or arms like modern glasses. They were crude, awkward, but miraculous. For the first time in human history, the failing eye could be helped, not by divine mercy, but by human craft. It is fascinating that the invention of glasses happened not in a scientific laboratory, but within the world of religion. Monks, scholars, and clergy were the first to use them. Reading the Bible, copying texts, studying theology. These were sacred tasks, and now the elderly could continue their devotion. In medieval Europe, sight was often associated with spiritual purity. Blindness symbolized sin or ignorance, while clarity of vision represented divine understanding. So when lenses allowed an old monk to see again, it felt almost like grace, a small, blessed miracle. Yet even this miracle spread slowly. Spectacles were expensive and handmade. Each lens was individually ground. The art of shaping curvature was still imprecise, and there was no understanding of optical power or diopters. Most people continued to live and die with blurred sight. At this stage in our journey, we begin to see what the ancients lacked. The invention of glasses required not only the idea of refraction but also three distinct skills. 1. Clear, bubble-free glass. Something only perfected in Venice after centuries of trial. 2. Precise grinding techniques. The ability to shape a lens symmetrically. 3. Understanding of optics. Knowing that curvature could adjust vision. The ancient Egyptians had glass but not purity. The Greeks had theory but not craft. The Romans had craft but not purpose. The Arabs had science but not the social push to apply it. Only when all three paths, material, mechanical, and intellectual, converged in late medieval Europe could the miracle of spectacles emerge. It was not genius alone that created glasses. It was time, the long patience of history. By the 14th century, spectacles had spread quietly through Italy and into Germany, France, and England. Artists began to depict scholars and monks wearing them in illuminated manuscripts and paintings. They were called occhiali in Italian, small eyes. And still, most people did not fully understand how they worked. They were curiosities, useful tools, half magic, half science. Imagine a medieval library at dusk, a scholar reading by candlelight. His eyes enlarged behind crude glass discs, the flame reflecting like stars in each lens. He doesn't know he's witnessing the birth of modern optics. He's simply grateful to see once more. The world had entered a new relationship with light. In the next batch, we'll follow how these early spectacles evolved, how craftsmen refined them, how scholars experimented with different shapes, and how, once again, the East and West shared the journey of vision. The world was changing. From the dim cloisters of monasteries to the bustling markets of Venice, something remarkable had begun to shimmer in the hands of men. A new power, both humble and divine, the power to see clearly again. By the mid-14th century, the invention of spectacles had spread quietly across Europe. It was not yet a revolution, just a whisper of light bending through glass. Yet that whisper would soon grow into a chorus that shaped science, art, and perception itself. No single man could claim the invention of eyeglasses. There was no grand discovery, no royal decree, no triumphant announcement. Instead, it spread person to person, workshop to workshop, the slow, secret rhythm of medieval craftsmanship. From Venice, traders carried spectacles across the Alps into Germany and France. In England, monks and scholars began to acquire them, often at great cost. Early lenses were simple. Convex glass meant for farsightedness. They enlarged script but distorted edges. Most users were elderly clergymen, scholars, and merchants who relied on reading. Ordinary people still lived without aid, their fading sight accepted as part of life's natural dimming. In 1352, a painting of Cardinal Hugh of St. Cher shows him wearing spectacles while reading the scriptures. It is one of the earliest known depictions of glasses in art. By then, spectacles had become symbols of wisdom and intellect, an object not merely of utility, but of learned prestige. The making of lenses was an art that demanded patience, precision, and intuition. In those early workshops, artisans had no scientific instruments to measure curvature. They relied entirely on their eyes, their hands, and the shimmering play of light across glass. The process began with a rough glass disc, heated until pliable, then shaped and ground against metal or stone using fine sand as an abrasive. The craftsman would hold it up to the light, tilt it gently, and watch how the world curved within it. Too flat, and the magnification was weak. Too round, and it distorted the image. This intimate relationship between man and material gave each lens a unique personality. No two pairs of glasses were identical. Some lenses were set in horn, bone, or wood, others in brass or leather. Many were handheld, others clipped together with rivets. They were not yet worn comfortably on the face. The idea of attaching them to the ears, that would come centuries later. The first spectacles helped only the far-sighted, the aging readers who could no longer focus on nearby text. But what of those born nearsighted, unable to see the world at a distance? For a long time there was no help for them. Convex lenses made nearby things clear but blurred the horizon further. It would take another 300 years before concave lenses, those that correct nearsightedness, were developed. The earliest mention of concave lenses appears in the writings of Nicholas of Cusa, a German philosopher and mathematician, around the mid-15th century. He described how such lenses could sharpen distant vision. By then, the Renaissance was dawning. The human eye, once considered a mystical vessel of divine sight, was now a subject of study, dissection, and fascination. The invention of spectacles coincided perfectly with a transformation in how humanity viewed itself. Painters began to explore light, shadow, and perspective. Scientists questioned nature not through faith, but through observation. Inventors like Leonardo da Vinci would sketch lenses, mirrors, and even early concepts of the contact lens, a thin glass cup filled with water to be placed directly over the eye. Renaissance art itself became sharper, more detailed, more luminous. This was not coincidence. The use of magnifying glasses allowed artists to study textures, wrinkles, reflections, and the subtle play of color in ways unseen before. Imagine a painter like Jan van Eyck, leaning over his canvas, peering through a small convex lens, capturing each glimmer of light upon a jewel. Through the glass, the world unfolded in greater depth and truth. The spectacle became both tool and metaphor, the eye's new servant and the mind's new mirror. The 15th and 16th centuries saw the slow merging of art, craft, and science. Where once philosophers merely imagined the nature of light, men now tested it. The humble spectacle inspired curiosity. If a single lens could enlarge writing, what could two lenses do together? This simple question led to the invention of the telescope and microscope, tools that would open the vastness of space and the hidden worlds of the microscopic. Without the early glassworkers of Venice and Florence, there would have been no Galileo peering at Jupiter's moons, no Leeuwenhoek discovering tiny life swimming in a drop of water, no Newton splitting light into its spectrum of colors. The path from eyeglass to telescope was not a straight line but a gentle curve, just like the lens itself. To wear glasses in medieval and Renaissance Europe was not simply a medical choice. It was a mark of intellect. Portraits from this period often depict scholars with spectacles perched on their noses or hanging from chains. Writers, theologians, and judges wore them as signs of wisdom. In contrast, the common folk sometimes mocked them, calling wearers four eyes, a phrase that would echo through centuries. Still, the cultural image of the scholar with glasses persisted, a symbol of patience, study, and mental clarity. Even today, when one imagines wisdom, the mind often paints a face framed by spectacles. That image was born here, in these centuries of candlelight and slow discovery. Looking back, one might wonder, why had none of the ancient civilizations, with their genius for building pyramids, temples, and aqueducts, reached this point? The answer, as history now shows, is that invention is rarely about intelligence alone. It is about convergence, the meeting of need, material, and mind. The ancients had the materials, but not the purity. They had the theories, but not the craft. They had the curiosity, but not the cultural push toward personal vision correction. The Middle Ages, often dismissed as dark, were in truth the bridge where those three strands finally met. The lens had been born, but it was still a child, rough, uneven, and poorly understood. In the next batch, we'll follow how this delicate invention matured, how optical science grew, how spectacle making became an art form, and how the act of seeing itself would change forever. The story of vision was no longer hidden in temples or monasteries. It now belonged to workshops, the hum of artisans, the slow grind of glass, the shimmer of sunlight through polished crystal. By the 15th century, the making of spectacles had spread far beyond the cloisters of monks. A quiet revolution of clarity was underway, guided not by kings or scholars, but by the hands of humble craftsmen. In cities like Florence, Nuremberg, and Venice, new guilds formed, associations of lens grinders, metalworkers, and spectacle makers. These guilds protected their trade secrets with fierce loyalty. The first official record of a spectacle makers' guild appears in Venice in 1300s, and later in 1535, the Worshipful Company of Spectacle Makers was established in London. Their motto was simple and beautifully human, aided by none but God. In small stone workshops, these craftsmen sat bent over glass discs, rubbing them with powders and water, feeling their surfaces with their fingertips. They worked without microscopes, without machines, without any understanding of optics, guided purely by instinct, reflection, and light. Each lens was a conversation between glass and eye. Until this time, only convex lenses, those that bulge outward, were commonly used. They helped the far-sighted, enlarging the small letters of sacred texts. But soon a second shape appeared. Concave lenses, those that curve inward. These were for the nearsighted, allowing distant objects to come into focus. This was a major step in understanding that different shapes of glass could correct different kinds of sight. No longer was it just about magnifying, it was about balancing the eye. By the late 15th century, scholars like Nicholas of Cusa and later Giovanni Battista della Porta began to write about these properties of curved lenses. Their works laid the intellectual foundation for the science of optics, a science that had waited thousands of years to be seen clearly. If you could step into one of those workshops, you'd find an almost meditative process, the rhythmic scraping of glass against stone, the slow turning of a wheel, and the craftsman's steady breathing as he watched the play of light across the surface. A good lens required hours, sometimes days, of careful grinding. The artisan would test it by holding it over a page of script, watching whether the letters grew crisp or distorted. Some lenses were slightly yellowed, others had air bubbles or ripples, imperfections that bent light unevenly. Yet for the wearer, these early glasses were nothing short of miraculous. Imagine an elderly scholar seeing a crisp line of text again after years of blurred vision. The joy, the astonishment. That first moment of clarity must have felt like seeing the world reborn. As demand for spectacles grew, glassmaking itself evolved. Venice, already famed for its cristallo, faced competition from Northern Europe. In the forests of Bohemia and Germany, glassmakers discovered that burning beechwood created potash, an ingredient that made glass both harder and clearer. This gave rise to Bohemian glass, prized for its brilliance. Meanwhile, in Florence, families like the Spini and del Cia began producing lenses that were exported across Europe. By the 16th century, spectacles were being traded along the same routes as silk and spices, precious cargo for the mind's eye. Glass had become not just a material, but a medium of knowledge. As more people gained access to spectacles, society itself began to change in subtle ways. Before, poor eyesight often forced scholars, scribes, and artisans into early retirement. Now, with glasses, their working lives extended. More books could be read, more ideas copied, more discoveries made. The invention of spectacles extended not just vision, but time. It allowed knowledge to endure longer within a single lifetime. And soon, another invention, the printing press, would amplify this transformation. When Johannes Gutenberg introduced movable type around 1450, books became more accessible than ever before. And with more reading came more strain on the eyes. Spectacles, once rare, now became almost essential for the educated class. In a way, the printing press and spectacles were twins, both born of humanity's hunger to see and understand. In medieval Europe, light had always carried spiritual meaning, the divine illumination. But by the Renaissance, light became a scientific mystery to solve. Scholars like Roger Bacon, a 13th-century English philosopher, had already predicted that lenses might be used to correct human sight. He wrote, "This instrument will aid the aged whose sight has become weak." But it was in the hands of artisans and natural philosophers of the 15th and 16th centuries that theory and craft finally merged. Giovanni Battista della Porta's Magia Naturalis, Natural Magic, published in 1558, described the properties of lenses and mirrors in vivid detail. He encouraged experimentation, to play with light, to test its laws, to see differently. It was a new way of thinking, not mystical but mechanical, not divine but discoverable. As people saw more clearly, they also began to see themselves differently. Artists painted self-portraits with astonishing accuracy, aided by lenses and mirrors. Mapmakers traced coastlines with precision. Scientists drew plants and insects in perfect detail. The lens had become more than a tool. It was a new window into reality. And yet, the deeper irony remained. It had taken humanity over 5,000 years to reach this point. For all their brilliance, the ancients had not been blind, only focused on the heavens, not the eye. They had studied the stars but missed the miracle inside themselves. In these centuries, light was no longer a mystery of the gods. It was a substance of study. And soon, that study would explode into the great age of scientific discovery. In the next batch, we'll journey into that awakening, where Galileo would lift his telescope to the sky, where lenses would reveal new worlds, and where vision itself would forever change the course of human history. The story of sight was no longer confined to workshops and reading tables. By the dawn of the 17th century, lenses were about to lift human vision from the page to the stars. It was the beginning of an age when glass would become a bridge, not only for seeing clearly, but for discovering the universe itself. It began quietly, almost accidentally. A Dutch spectacle maker named Hans Lippershey, while experimenting with lenses in 1608, noticed that combining a convex and concave lens inside a small tube made distant objects appear closer. That single, humble observation changed the world. The invention, soon known as the telescope, spread across Europe like wildfire. Scientists, sailors, and scholars scrambled to make their own versions, polishing lenses with a precision never before attempted. And within a year, an Italian mathematician and philosopher, Galileo Galilei, would point that tube of glass and metal toward the heavens, and what he saw would shatter centuries of belief. In 1609, standing on a cold Venetian balcony, Galileo raised his handmade telescope, its magnification barely 20x, and gazed at the moon. What he saw wasn't divine perfection. He saw mountains and craters, shadows cast by sunlight, and rough, broken terrain. The heavens, once thought to be flawless, were imperfect, like Earth itself. Galileo turned his telescope to Jupiter next, and 4 small points of light circled the great planet. These, he realized, were moons orbiting Jupiter, proof that not everything revolved around the Earth. This discovery would lead him into conflict with the Church, but it also proved something profound. A piece of ground glass could reveal truths the naked eye could never see. While telescopes opened the skies, another instrument turned inward, toward the invisible. In the Netherlands, around the same time, craftsmen like Zacharias Janssen and later Antony van Leeuwenhoek began perfecting lenses that magnified the tiniest details of nature. The microscope was born. Under these lenses, a drop of water came alive, wriggling, swirling, full of microscopic creatures never before imagined. Van Leeuwenhoek called them animalcules, little animals. For the first time, humanity realized that life existed on a scale too small to see. It was as if another universe, not above but below, had been waiting in silence for the invention of glass. From the heavens to the cell, the same material, sand, fire, and skill, had unlocked 2 opposite worlds. The telescope stretched the boundaries of the infinite. The microscope explored the limits of the invisible. Between them, humanity found itself standing at the center, a species defined by its curiosity, by its need to see more. And yet, the same tool that allowed philosophers to glimpse galaxies also gave common people the gift of reading their prayers and letters. The lens had become the great equalizer, as divine for the poor scholar as for the royal astronomer. With every experiment, light itself began to surrender its secrets. In 1621, Willebrord Snellius discovered the laws of refraction, how light bends when passing through glass. And in 1666, Isaac Newton passed sunlight through a prism and revealed that light was made of many colors: red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. The prism, just another shaped piece of glass, had turned sunlight into a rainbow, and mystery into measurement. Optics was no longer a craft or a curiosity. It had become a science, the study of how the universe sees itself. The lens makers of this era were still anonymous heroes. In small towns like Middelburg, Florence, and London, they labored without fame or wealth. Their hands were scarred from polishing glass. Their eyes strained from long hours at the wheel. They did not write books or attend royal courts. Yet every philosopher, astronomer, and doctor depended on their work. It was a quiet brotherhood of artisans and thinkers, linked not by blood but by clarity. They turned raw sand into sight. But as vision expanded, so did doubt. The telescope showed that Earth was not the center of the universe. The microscope revealed that life was far more complex than Scripture described. And many wondered, if glass could reveal so much, what else had humanity been blind to? Philosophers began to question the very nature of truth. Was seeing believing? Or could the lens itself deceive, bending not just light but perception? These questions would haunt scientists and mystics alike for centuries to come. By the end of the 17th century, the union of glass and knowledge had transformed medicine, astronomy, navigation, and art. Surgeons used magnifying lenses for operations. Artists studied light with new understanding. Sailors used telescopes to map the oceans and reach new continents. Humanity's vision, once bound by the limits of biology, had become mechanical. The eye had evolved through invention. And yet, even as telescopes reached the stars, most ordinary people still couldn't afford a single pair of spectacles. The miracle of sight remained a luxury, fragile, expensive, and often out of reach. The world had learned to see the cosmos, but many of its own citizens still lived in blur. A strange irony. The same civilizations that conquered space had yet to bring clarity to their own people. The lens had given humanity its greatest power, vision beyond flesh, and its greatest question: if we can see so much, why do we still understand so little? In the next batch, the story will shift toward the Industrial Revolution, where lenses became mass-produced, vision became democratized, and the age of modern sight, from spectacles to photography, would begin. The 18th century arrived with the rhythm of machinery and the heartbeat of invention. Humanity had crossed a threshold, from candlelight to the age of steam. And in this new world of factories and smoke, even glass, that humble art of sand and fire, was about to be reborn. In the early decades of the Industrial Revolution, something profound happened to the way glass was made. For thousands of years, each lens had been shaped by hand, turned against a grinding stone by artisans who worked more by instinct than by science. But now, machines began to take over that delicate task. Steam-powered polishing wheels, steel molds, and new methods of cutting allowed glass to be made faster, clearer, and cheaper. No longer was it the luxury of kings or scholars. It began to enter the lives of ordinary people. In London, Paris, and Vienna, small optical shops opened on cobbled streets. Behind their windows hung rows of spectacles, oval, round, rectangular, inviting those who had lived in blur to finally see. By the mid-1800s, spectacles were being mass-produced for the first time. Factories in Germany, England, and France turned out thousands of lenses each month. For the price of a loaf of bread, one could walk into a market and buy a pair of simple reading glasses. It was a quiet revolution, not one of guns or banners, but of clarity. For the first time in human history, vision itself was no longer a privilege. It became a right, accessible to anyone who needed it. Children could study longer. Workers could read instructions so fabric repair machines. Elders could once again see the faces of their families. Human productivity and dignity expanded simply because sight had been restored. As the need for spectacles grew, so too did the profession of those who crafted them. The opticians. They were not merely craftsmen now. They were scientists blending art with geometry, physics, and medicine. By the late 19th century, the study of the human eye had advanced dramatically. Ophthalmology emerged as a true medical discipline. Doctors learned how the eye focused, how light curved inside it, and how age or injury could distort that perfection. They created instruments, retinoscopes and ophthalmoscopes, that could peer into the living eye. Once again, glass was the gateway. This time not to the stars or the microbes, but to the soul's window itself. The spectacle, once seen as a sign of age or weakness, slowly became part of identity. In portraits of the 1800s, we see scholars, poets, and even revolutionaries wearing them proudly. Benjamin Franklin, Charles Dickens, Karl Marx. Their spectacles glinted in candlelight like symbols of wisdom. Franklin himself had designed bifocals, combining two lenses into one for reading, one for distance. No more switching between pairs. The eye could travel seamlessly across near and far. It was practical, elegant, and deeply human. A small adaptation that carried within it centuries of desire, the longing to see clearly, always. The 19th century also gave birth to new uses for glass that transformed the modern world. Microscopes grew stronger, telescopes larger. Cameras, boxes of wood, metal, and lenses, began capturing reality itself. Everywhere glass appeared, it expanded perception. In architecture, greenhouses used glass to bring sunlight to plants year-round. In laboratories, test tubes and beakers allowed scientists to see chemical reactions. In cities, shop windows turned commerce into spectacle. Glass, once the tool of a few, became the skin of civilization. But even as glass spread, perfection remained elusive. No two human eyes were alike, and the lenses of the 19th century were crude by modern standards. Most spectacles were sold without prescriptions, simple magnifiers based on guesswork. For many they helped. For others they caused headaches, dizziness, even nausea. It wasn't until the late 1800s that true optical testing began. Charts of letters, known as Snellen charts, allowed doctors to measure vision scientifically. The letters E, F, P, T, O became the gateway to personalized sight. At last, humanity could not only make glass, it could tailor light itself to the needs of each eye. As the 19th century faded into the 20th, a deeper relationship emerged between humanity and glass. Mirrors, lenses, spectacles, and cameras, they all reflected not just what was seen, but how it was seen. Philosophers like Nietzsche and Marcel Proust wrote of perception as a fragile construct, that the world itself was filtered through the human eye. And scientists like James Clerk Maxwell used glass prisms and filters to study color and light, leading to the birth of photography and film. The more humanity looked, the more it realized that sight was not passive, it was creative. To see was to shape reality. By the early 1900s, lens grinding had achieved near perfection. Factories in America, Japan, and Europe used electricity and automation to create lenses so precise they could correct almost any visual defect. Companies like Bosch and Lohm, Zeiss, and Kodak turned optical science into global industries. For the first time, the spectacle was not a handmade charm. It was modern engineering. Millions now wore glasses. School children, soldiers, engineers, mothers, scientists. What had once been impossible for ancient civilizations was now an everyday miracle. The invisible barrier that had separated the clear-eyed from the blind was finally dissolved by the persistence of centuries, and the shimmer of sand turned to sight. By the dawn of the 20th century, humanity lived surrounded by glass. We looked through it, in windows, microscopes, telescopes, and spectacles. We photographed through it, measured through it, and dreamed through it. The world had become transparent, in both a literal and symbolic way. The same substance ancient civilizations had only used for ornaments and jewelry was now shaping science, medicine, art, and identity. Glass had evolved from an object into an extension of the human eye. But the journey of vision was not over. In the next batch we enter the modern age, where glass became light itself, turning into cameras, fiber optics, and lenses that see farther than any human eye ever could. The 20th century unfolded like a curtain of glass. Everywhere, the world shimmered with reflections. Windows of cities, lenses of cameras, the silent glow of scientific discovery. And though the age of spectacles had already changed how we saw, the next transformation would change what we could imagine seeing. For glass, that ancient art of sand and fire, was no longer just a tool for vision. It was becoming the medium of modern life. Electricity had conquered the night. Cities no longer slept beneath stars. They glittered with bulbs, filaments, and neon. And behind each of those lights, hidden in bulbs and lenses, was glass, carefully shaped to hold the delicate heart of light itself. Glass had become more than sight. It had become illumination. From Edison's light bulb to the glowing lenses of film projectors, glass became the vessel that carried the modern world into brightness. Ancient civilizations had looked to fire for warmth. Modern civilization had captured it inside a sphere of glass. The First and Second World Wars accelerated optical technology beyond imagination. Lenses were no longer crafted only for books and eyes, but for machines. Binoculars, periscopes, cameras, bomb sights, and telescopes. Precision optics decided battles as much as bullets did. Engineers learned to grind lenses so perfect that a single curve could determine the outcome of a mission. After the wars, that same precision found peace. Those who had once made instruments for destruction began building devices for discovery. Microscopes, cameras, projectors, and eyeglasses of unmatched quality. The cold precision of war had birthed the clarity of peace. By mid-century, glass was no longer just helping people see, it was seeing for them. The camera lens became the new eye of civilization. It remembered moments, told stories, captured truth, and sometimes created illusion. Film reels shimmered through glass lenses, projecting dreams into theaters. Photographers bent down behind cameras, freezing the world through apertures smaller than the pupil of a human eye. The invention of photography and cinema transformed the act of seeing into an art form. The world began to understand that every lens carried not just light, but perspective. Yet while machines learned to see, humanity continued to refine its own vision. In 1887, A German glassblower named F.A. Mahler created the first contact lens, a thin, curved shell of glass that rested directly on the eye. It was painful, heavy, and difficult to wear, but revolutionary. By the 1930s, with new materials like plastic, contact lenses became lighter and transparent enough for everyday use. For the first time in history, people could correct their sight without altering their appearance. The boundary between the body and the lens had vanished. Human vision had merged with technology. In the 1940s and 50s, scientists found ways to record information on glass, thin coatings that captured images, light, and data. Microscopes and telescopes pushed deeper into the micro and the cosmic, while photography evolved into film, and then microfilm, storing libraries of knowledge within thin transparent sheets. It was as if glass itself had begun to remember. Libraries, laboratories, and even governments trusted glass to hold the story of civilization, frozen in light. Then, in 1960, something extraordinary happened. At Hughes Research Laboratories, Theodore Maiman built the first laser, a device that produced light so pure and focused that it could cut through metal or measure the distance to the moon. The laser was the next step in the story of controlled light. And at its heart was glass. Special optical materials, often quartz or fused silica, guided and amplified light with surgical precision. Where ancient people used fire to forge tools, modern people used light itself. By the late 20th century, glass carried not just light but information. Thin strands, called fiber optics, could transmit data faster than any metal wire. Inside these fibers, light pulsed like a heartbeat, carrying voices, images, and knowledge across continents and oceans. A message could travel from London to New York in less than a second, through nothing but light trapped inside glass. What once connected the human eye to the world now connected the entire world together. Ancient civilizations had drawn maps on clay. Modern civilization drew them in light. Meanwhile, doctors began using lenses and lasers for healing. Microscopic cameras, endoscopes, allowed surgeons to see inside the human body without cutting it open. Lasers reshaped corneas, restoring perfect vision in seconds. And microscopes could now magnify down to the molecular level, revealing the blueprints of life itself. In hospitals, laboratories, and classrooms, glass remained the quiet observer, letting humans see the unseen time and again. As the century ended, a new kind of glass took over the world: screens. From television to computers to mobile phones, glass became the surface of modern existence. We looked through it, touched it, lived by it. Behind each screen was a web of electricity and color, billions of pixels painting reality anew every second. The eye no longer sought the natural horizon, but the glowing rectangles of light that filled every waking hour. And yet, through every invention, the story returned to the same ancient desire: to see clearly. By the late 20th century, philosophers and artists began to question whether humanity had seen too much. If ancient people were blind to detail, perhaps modern people were blind to meaning. Every moment was captured, photographed, filmed. Yet the mystery of the world seemed to grow smaller. Seeing everything did not mean understanding everything. The lens had given humanity infinite clarity and infinite confusion. From the first polished quartz of ancient Egypt to the fiber cables beneath modern oceans, the journey of sight had come full circle. Light had always been there, in the stars, in the fire, in the human soul. All it took was glass to reveal it. Civilizations had waited millennia to turn sight into science, and when they did, they not only corrected their eyes, they redefined what it meant to be alive. To see was to exist. And so, the glass that once failed to appear in ancient times became the material through which all modern knowledge flowed. From lenses to lasers, from telescopes to touchscreens, it was never just about vision. It was about the eternal human hunger to illuminate darkness. The 20th century ended with a strange twist in the long story of sight. For thousands of years, humans had worked to see more clearly, polishing glass, bending light, and chasing vision. But now, as the 21st century dawned, something quietly reversed. Glass, the silent witness of history, began to see us back. It began simply, even innocently. Security cameras in shops, webcams on desks, tiny lenses in computers and phones. Each one was an eye, unblinking, patient, and connected. A network of vision far beyond the reach of any human being. For the first time in history, the world itself was watching. Glass, once a barrier between observer and observed, had become a window both ways. It reflected light, but it also recorded it, turning every street, every station, every airport into a theater of constant observation. The ancient dream of seeing everything had come true, but not as the ancients imagined. By the 2010s, cameras were everywhere. In pockets, in cars, in the sky. They captured every moment. Birthdays, meals, laughter, war. Through them, humanity had become both the subject and the spectator. Every photograph was a confession. Every video a mirror. We had taught glass to watch, and in doing so, we found ourselves surrounded by infinite reflections. Memories, profiles, recordings. We no longer looked through glass to see the world. We looked at it to see ourselves. But as technology advanced, the human role in vision began to fade. Artificial intelligence learned to recognize faces, patterns, and motion. Cameras could now identify a person by the curve of their smile or the blink of an eye. Glass, guided by code, had become intelligent. Where once we asked lenses to show us the stars, now they traced our movements through crowded streets. The light that once revealed truth now carried data. Billions of points of information describing how, where, and who we were. The world had built a nervous system of glass and light. And we were inside it. In the ancient world, to hide was simple. A dark corner, a closed door, a distant village. But in the digital age, glass made concealment impossible. Every screen was a window. Every reflection a signal. The same transparency that had once symbolized knowledge now symbolized exposure. Glass had always been the symbol of clarity. Now it became the symbol of vulnerability. Even in this age of screens, one old craft survived. The making of lenses for human eyes. But the purpose changed. Modern lenses were no longer only about correction. They became instruments of enhancement. Night vision goggles, smart glasses, augmented reality displays. All extended the reach of human sight beyond natural limits. Surgeons operated through head-mounted lenses. Soldiers saw in the dark. Gamers stepped into digital worlds layered over the real one. Human vision was no longer confined to biology. It had entered a new phase, synthetic sight. Architects, too, began shaping the world with this new kind of vision. Buildings were designed with smart glass that could change transparency with a touch. Car windows adjusted tint automatically to sunlight. Entire city skylines shimmered like intelligent mirrors. Glass had become alive, no longer passive but responsive. What ancient Egyptians once melted for decoration now carried electricity, energy, and emotion. The same material that once framed the pharaoh's jewelry now powered skyscrapers and satellites. Satellites, vast telescopes orbiting Earth, became the newest eyes of humankind. Their lenses, protected by layers of space-grade glass, could see entire continents, storms, and cities. Every cloud pattern, every burning forest, every river delta was captured in luminous detail. The distance between observer and observed had never been greater, and yet never so intimate. Ancient astronomers had once looked up to the heavens to read the stars. Now the heavens looked down upon Earth, through the eyes of machines. Humanity had achieved what no civilization before could imagine: total visibility. But with that came unease. Was there still any mystery left? Was there still anything unseen? Philosophers began to speak of a crisis of light, a world so illuminated that shadows had nowhere left to hide. And in that endless exposure, something ancient returned: the longing for unknowing, the desire to close one's eyes. For centuries, glass had been a symbol of enlightenment. Now it began to whisper a question: had we gone too far? As society became more digital, human contact itself began to pass through glass. We spoke through screens. We loved through screens. We mourned through screens. The transparency that once united us began to separate us. A thin, invisible wall, clear yet unbreakable, divided touch from presence. We could see each other perfectly, but we could no longer feel each other. The same invention that made us visible had also made us distant. If the people of Babylon, Greece, or Egypt could see this world, they would not recognize it. And yet, perhaps they would understand it deeply. They too had stared into polished bronze, obsidian, and still water, searching for reflection. They too had longed to capture what was fleeting, to hold an image, to preserve a face. The difference was not in the desire, only in the clarity. What they dreamed, modern humanity achieved. But in doing so, we discovered that clarity can sometimes blind. Through glass we now see everything. Atoms, galaxies, strangers, and ourselves. But understanding, the true vision, remains elusive. The more detail we perceive, the more meaning seems to slip away. Ancient people saw little, but perhaps they understood much. Modern people see everything, and sometimes nothing at all. And so, the story of vision takes a quiet turn, from invention to introspection. The same glass that once opened the heavens and healed the eyes now reveals the deepest mystery of all, that to truly see, one must also know when to look away. The story of glass began with sand and fire, but it ends, at least for now, with something far more fragile. Not the eye, not the lens, but the soul behind it. Because when everything becomes visible, when nothing can hide, what happens to who we are? By the mid-21st century, light had conquered everything. Cameras saw in the dark. X-rays looked through flesh. Infrared revealed heat behind walls. There were no more shadows, only exposure. First it felt like triumph. Science had finally lifted the last veil between the seen and the unseen. But soon the world began to feel too clear. There was no mystery left, no privacy, no pause. Every secret turned into data. Every glance became a record. The world had achieved perfect vision, but lost its depth. Cities turned into shimmering monuments of light. Buildings made of transparent glass walls rose into the skies, glowing like frozen lightning. From the outside you could see people moving inside, walking, talking, eating, working like tiny living figures in a crystal dome. But if you looked closer, there was something uncanny. No one looked up. No one looked out. Everyone faced inward, toward screens, toward reflections, toward themselves. Glass had once promised openness. Now it trapped people inside their own reflections. Night, that ancient friend of secrets and dreams, began to vanish. Streetlights burned endlessly. Screens glowed through windows. Even the stars faded under the haze of artificial light. For the first time in history, humanity no longer knew true darkness. And in losing it, we lost something else. The comfort of not seeing, of imagination filling the void. Children stopped wondering what hid in the shadows. Adults stopped dreaming about the unseen. In our hunger to illuminate everything, we forgot that darkness also protects. Every person became a performer. Every life became a show. The line between private and public blurred like mist on glass. People crafted digital versions of themselves. Brighter, sharper, cleaner. Reflections more beautiful than reality. But the more perfect the reflection, the emptier the real person became. Behind every smile on the screen, there was a silent exhaustion. Behind every share and like, there was an invisible hunger to be seen, not just watched. Glass, which once helped humans see the world, had now made them desperate to be seen through it. And then, something unexpected began. People started to rebel. Not with weapons, but with absence. They turned off cameras, deleted profiles, closed shutters. They painted over windows, dimmed their lights, and vanished into small, unseen spaces. A movement began, the movement of the invisible. They called it the Shadow Renaissance. Artists painted with dark pigments again. Writers praised mystery over clarity. Photographers captured blur instead of focus. Humanity rediscovered the beauty of not seeing everything, of leaving things unknown. In that same age, a new philosopher emerged, a woman named Dr. Ilara Venn. Her lectures filled halls lined with glass screens, glowing with her image across continents. But her message was simple, ancient, and haunting. To see everything is to understand nothing. Glass should be a window, not a cage of light. She reminded people that the ancients, who lacked lenses, mirrors, and clarity, still built wonders. They navigated by stars. They healed by touch. They believed by heart. And perhaps, she said, they saw truth more clearly than we ever will. Her words echoed through the digital world like a whisper from the past. In quiet workshops, artisans began to make glass again. Not industrial, perfect, machine-smooth glass, but imperfect human glass. Each piece had tiny bubbles, ripples, and flaws. When light passed through it, it shimmered like living water. Collectors called it ancient light. People placed it in windows not for transparency, but for distortion. Because distortion, that gentle bending of the world, felt real again. Through it, people saw not the world as it was, but as they felt it. Meanwhile, engineers created lenses not for clarity, but for emotion. Memory glasses, they called them. When worn, they slightly altered what you saw, adding warmth, color, nostalgia like an old photograph. Each pair tuned the world to a feeling. Joy, peace, melancholy. Vision had come full circle. From ancient obsidian mirrors that reflected emotion, to modern AI glasses that filtered light through memory. Humans had finally learned that seeing was not about truth, but meaning. In one city, a strange museum opened. Inside, visitors were asked to leave their devices, close their eyes, and walk through rooms guided only by scent, sound, and touch. At the end, when they finally opened their eyes, they found themselves in a hall of ancient artifacts. Crystal, obsidian, glass, displayed behind fogged glass that made them almost invisible. A plaque read, "You do not need sight to see. You only need to feel that something is there." It became one of the most visited museums in the world. As centuries passed, the story of glass became the story of humanity itself. Born from blindness, shaped by curiosity, perfected by reason, and finally softened again by wisdom. Ancient civilizations never invented glasses, not because they lacked knowledge, but because they still understood mystery. They saw with the heart before the eyes. And maybe that is why their vision, though dim by modern standards, was somehow more pure. The purpose of seeing is not to remove darkness, but to find light within it. The story of vision is, at its core, the story of humanity. From the first polished stone in Mesopotamia to the fiber optics beneath our oceans, every lens carries within it the desire to see more, to know more, to exist more fully. And yet, the greatest legacy of vision is not clarity of the eyes, but clarity of the spirit. Long before spectacles or telescopes, civilizations understood the fragility of sight. Egyptians painted eyes on tombs, believing they would see the afterlife. The Greeks carved oculi in temples, sacred apertures for light to pass through stone. Chinese scholars polished crystal and quartz for rituals and observation. Though crude by modern standards, these early tools reflected profound understanding. That vision was both practical and spiritual. Seeing clearly was secondary to perceiving wisely. Every civilization attempted to bend light to its will. Romans made rudimentary magnifying glasses from blown glass. Medieval monks experimented with reading stones, placing curved crystal over manuscripts to ease the strain of dim candlelight. These simple acts carried a powerful message. Humans have always sought clarity, not for vanity, but for understanding. Vision was not merely about the eye. It was about connecting with knowledge itself. Through centuries, the lens maker remained a quiet hero. They were not celebrated in epics or myths, yet their work defined the possibilities of every age. Every telescope, microscope, and pair of spectacles was a thread linking the ancient past to the modern present. Without them, Galileo would not have seen moons, Van Leeuwenhoek would not have seen microbes, and we would not have glimpsed the world as it truly is. Craftsmanship, patience, and observation became the unbroken legacy of human vision. What began as a simple desire to see clearly transformed everything. Agriculture, medicine, astronomy, navigation, art. All depended on the capacity to perceive the unseen. The lens extended the eye's reach, but also the mind's. Every tool of clarity became a tool of imagination. In this way, vision has always been both practical and poetic, a bridge between reality and dream. Ancient civilizations never invented glasses, perhaps because they already understood something modern humans often forget. The Egyptians, Greeks, Babylonians, and Chinese recognized that not all knowledge comes from what is visible. The soul, intuition, memory, and imagination were all forms of seeing beyond sight. Glass became necessary only when the natural eye could no longer suffice. But wisdom never required lenses. Their limitation was biological, yet their vision remained spiritual. When we now gaze through telescopes or microscopes, we participate in a continuum of human curiosity. We are standing on millennia of experimentation, wonder, and dedication. We peer into galaxies and cells, yet we are linked to the monks, artisans, and philosophers who polished crystal in candlelight centuries ago. Vision is not a modern invention. It is a legacy. Each lens is a story, each reflection a whisper from the past. The power of glass is not only in sight but in memory. Photography, film, digital imaging, these are extensions of the ancient desire to preserve what the eyes capture. Ancient civilizations could not preserve moving images, yet they left hieroglyphs, murals, and artifacts that communicated across time. Modern lenses simply amplified this impulse, allowing sight to travel further and endure longer. Glass became a medium of memory, bridging centuries and continents. Perhaps the greatest truth of vision is that it is never purely mechanical. Even with perfect lenses, humans still interpret, imagine, and wonder. The telescope can show the moons of Jupiter, but only the mind can feel awe. The microscope can reveal microbes, but only the mind can feel the miracle of life. Seeing is never passive. It is active participation in the universe. Ancient civilizations understood this instinctively, long before glass or lenses. Every act of seeing carries responsibility. The lens that allowed Galileo to glimpse the heavens also demanded ethical reflection. The microscope that revealed life demanded respect for the natural world. Modern surveillance, fiber optics, and smart lenses remind us that vision can empower or intrude. Humanity's gift of sight is inseparable from its moral dimension. Vision is not only about perception, it is about care. From sand and obsidian to modern glass, humans have always chased clarity. We have sought to see farther, smaller, brighter, and truer. But the story reminds us that vision is more than biology or optics. It is a metaphor, a journey, a longing. It is the desire to understand the world, others, and ourselves. And perhaps this longing is what unites all civilizations, ancient and modern, those who invented lenses and those who did not. Vision has always been more than a biological sense. It is a reflection of human curiosity, desire, and imagination. Through the millennia, glass has amplified our eyes, but the story of vision is also the story of wisdom, of knowing what to see and how to use that sight. Ancient civilizations never invented glasses, yet they excelled in perception. The Egyptians measured shadows to build pyramids aligned with stars. The Greeks studied optics through observation of water, mirrors, and the sun. Chinese astronomers tracked eclipses and planetary motion without telescopes. Their eyes were unassisted, yet their understanding of patterns, cycles, and nature was profound. It was not perfect vision they prized, but interpretive vision, the ability to see meaning in what is visible. Lenses would come later. Wisdom was present from the beginning. Through history, those who relied purely on vision often failed. Blind men, monks, and scholars cultivated other senses, touch, hearing, intuition, and discovered truths beyond the eye. Ancient builders and astronomers demonstrated that knowledge can exist without mechanical aid. Yet when the first lenses were polished, humans discovered that enhanced sight accelerates discovery, but cannot replace judgment. Glass teaches us to see better, but not to know better. With enhanced vision came new responsibilities. The telescope revealed moons, stars, and galaxies, but it also challenged religious and philosophical beliefs. The microscope revealed life invisible to the naked eye, but it also raised ethical questions about manipulation and experimentation. Sight itself can illuminate, but it can also overwhelm. Ancient civilizations lived with partial vision, and perhaps in that limitation, they exercised a form of caution lost in modern times. Humanity's longing for clarity is eternal. We want to see farther than our arms reach, smaller than our eyes can detect, and deeper than our minds can imagine. Glass has been the fulfillment of that desire, and yet, it has also exposed human fragility. For every invention there is the risk of misuse. For every revelation, there is the chance of arrogance. Vision is a gift, but wisdom is required to wield it well. Lenses magnify, focus, and correct. They extend the natural ability of the eye, but they also create illusions. The telescope magnifies the cosmos, but distance can obscure context. The microscope magnifies life, but scale can obscure meaning. The camera records the moment, but memory distorts emotion. Enhanced vision can illuminate details while blinding us to the whole. Ancient civilizations, with their unassisted sight, perhaps maintained a balance we have struggled to regain. History shows that seeing is not identical to understanding. Galileo saw moons orbiting Jupiter, a truth previously unimaginable. Yet even he could not foresee all consequences of that revelation. The more we see, the more the world challenges us to interpret. Glass allows us to collect information, but interpretation requires judgment, empathy, and patience. Wisdom cannot be mass-produced like lenses. It grows slowly through experience and reflection. Humanity's relationship with sight is intertwined with morality. Ancient civilizations guided vision with ritual and ethics, the careful observation of the heavens, the stars, the seasons. Modern vision, telescopic, microscopic, digital, requires a similar discipline. Seeing the world is easy. Seeing it responsibly is hard. And so, the history of glass and lenses is also the history of human choice. The tools themselves are neutral. It is how humans use them that defines their legacy. Glass has always carried a metaphorical weight. It is transparent yet fragile. It allows light to pass through, but it can break, can illuminate, distort, or even imprison. Ancient civilizations understood that clarity is not always beneficial. They valued balance, mystery, and hidden meaning. Modern humans have learned the power of transparency in architecture, surveillance, photography, and digital media. But the lessons of restraint are harder to remember. The journey from polished quartz to fiber optics, from rudimentary spectacles to augmented reality, reveals a consistent theme. Humans have always desired to see more than what is immediately visible. Civilizations without glasses navigated their worlds successfully through intuition, observation, and reflection. Civilizations with glass expanded vision exponentially. Yet the greatest lesson remains timeless. Vision alone is insufficient. It must be guided by patience, humility, and understanding. As humans continue to refine lenses, telescopes, microscopes, and digital devices, we carry forward both the successes and limitations of the past. The legacy of ancient civilizations reminds us, clarity of sight is a gift. Wisdom in using it is the responsibility. Even as technology advances, the lessons of the past endure, that seeing is not the same as knowing, and that the unseen often carries truths that no lens can capture. Throughout history, humans have sought to see more clearly. Yet ancient civilizations never invented glasses. This absence is not merely technological, it is profoundly philosophical. Vision, in its truest sense, is not only about the eyes. It is about understanding, perception, and the acceptance of limits. Ancient people understood the value of limits. The Egyptians, Greeks, Mesopotamians, and Chinese navigated the world without optical aids, yet they excelled in astronomy, medicine, architecture, and art. They recognized that human senses are partial, and that wisdom lies in embracing this partiality. Seeing everything clearly is not always desirable. Some truths reveal themselves only to patience, intuition, and reflection. Glasses would have granted clarity, yes, but they would not have granted insight. Limitation was a teacher. Civilizations before lenses valued mystery. The Egyptians built pyramids aligned to stars, but many details of their construction remain unknown. The Greeks observed light and shadow but left questions of perception to philosophers rather than instruments. The Chinese charted eclipses, yet left space for divination and spiritual interpretation. They accepted that not all could be observed, and that some understanding comes from speculation and imagination. Glass, in its absence, did not hinder them. It preserved the mystery of the world. The ancients recognized that vision is not neutral. To see is to interpret. To interpret is to act. In societies without mechanical aids, humans relied on communal observation, ritual, and ethical reflection. Sight alone did not dictate action. Wisdom did. Glasses, while useful, were unnecessary to cultivate moral discernment. They enhanced eyes, but ancient civilizations trained the mind. Without lenses, people learned patience. Reading by candlelight, counting stars at dusk, tracking seasonal changes over decades, all demanded persistence. Observation was not instant. It was deliberate. Mistakes were inevitable, yet they became lessons. In contrast, modern vision grants immediacy. We see faster but sometimes without reflection. The absence of glasses in the ancient world fostered a rhythm of observation intertwined with thought. Vision is more than light entering the eye. Ancient civilizations saw in multiple ways. By listening to the world, the flow of rivers, the songs of birds. By feeling patterns, wind across fields, the changing seasons. By reflecting on symbols, hieroglyphs, myths, and geometry. This multisensory perception cultivated understanding that extended beyond the visible. Glasses could not replace this depth. They could only augment one sense. When humans extended vision through lenses, telescopes, and microscopes, ethical questions emerged. Ancient civilizations had implicit rules. To see was to respect boundaries, to avoid intrusion, to balance curiosity with humility. Modern technologies sometimes ignore these principles. We now record, surveil, and analyze at unprecedented scale. The absence of glasses in antiquity may have preserved a form of ethical restraint embedded in observation itself. The imagination thrives where vision is limited. When the eye cannot resolve every detail, the mind fills in the gaps. Ancient storytellers, artists, and philosophers relied on this creative vision. They imagined worlds beyond what could be seen, forging myths and ideas that endure to this day. Glasses might have reduced error, but they also could have diminished the need for imagination. Perhaps human creativity depends, in part, on what the eye cannot see. The history of lenses teaches a critical lesson. Instruments amplify human ability, but they do not replace understanding. Ancient civilizations achieved remarkable feats, pyramids, aqueducts, precise calendars, without magnifying glass, telescope, or microscope. Their accomplishments relied on observation, reasoning, and accumulated wisdom. Glasses were a tool waiting for necessity, but human ingenuity existed long before necessity demanded them. Finally, the absence of glasses may have instilled humility. Ancient humans accepted uncertainty and imperfection. They knew that eyes deceive, that perspectives are limited, that knowledge is provisional. In contrast, modern society often assumes that seeing clearly equals knowing fully. The lesson of the ancients remains. Perfect vision does not guarantee perfect understanding. Humility, patience, and reflection are as vital as clarity of sight. As we approach the final batches, the story draws together history, philosophy, and human experience. The tale of glasses is not merely technical. It is a meditation on perception, responsibility, imagination, and the enduring balance between clarity and mystery. The story of vision stretches across millennia. From the unassisted eyes of ancient civilizations to the fiber-optic networks of today, the pursuit of clarity has been a constant. And yet, it is not the lens that defines us, it is how we choose to see. Civilizations have come and gone, but the desire to perceive clearly remains eternal. Mesopotamians charted the heavens. Greeks studied light and shadow. Romans polished glass to magnify manuscripts. Medieval scholars experimented with rudimentary reading stones. Each generation inherited the curiosity of its ancestors. Glasses were not invented because humanity lacked imagination. They were delayed because necessity and perspective evolve slowly. Vision, it seems, always arrives in the fullness of time. Ancient societies thrived without glasses. Their tasks, agriculture, construction, navigation, art, could be accomplished with unaided sight. Their understanding of the world was mediated by observation, trial, and reflection. The need for corrective lenses arose only when society's complexity demanded precise work. Reading fine script, crafting delicate tools, exploring distant stars, examining microscopic life. Thus, glasses are not a mark of ancient failure, but of evolution, of vision expanding alongside human ambition. The absence of glasses in antiquity preserved balance. Humans lived with imperfection, mystery, and imagination. They could see enough to survive, but not so much that every secret was revealed. Modern sight, enhanced by lenses and optics, brings clarity. But clarity carries a cost. The loss of mystery, the temptation to believe that seeing equals understanding. Ancient civilizations remind us that some unknowns enrich life. Not every shadow needs illumination. Not every detail demands focus. Ancient societies also teach the value of communal perception. Without mechanical aids, observation was collective. Monks shared readings of stars, architects debated measurements, and apprentices learned from masters' eyes. Today, technology amplifies vision but often isolates perception. We see individually through screens, microscopes, or telescopes, but rarely together. The social dimension of seeing, once central to learning and ethics, is now mediated by solitary lenses and devices. The lesson: vision is not merely personal. It is shared, interpreted, and discussed. The absence of glasses also preserved imagination. Ancient artists depicted the world not with photographic precision, but with interpretive depth. Every mural, carving, and manuscript carried both observation and imagination. Limited vision forced humans to fill in gaps, to innovate, to create. Glasses correct biological limitations, but they cannot replace creative interpretation. Ancient civilizations remind us that limitation is sometimes a catalyst for imagination, not an obstacle. Sight carries responsibility. Modern technologies, surveillance, high-resolution imaging, and digital connectivity expand vision but also introduce ethical dilemmas. Ancient civilizations, limited by unaided eyes, faced simpler moral landscapes. This limitation enforced restraint. They learned that some things are better left unseen, and some truths unfold only in time. Glasses amplify power, but wisdom remains essential. Modern humans see both the infinitesimal and the infinite. Microscopes reveal cells, electrons, and molecules. Telescopes reveal galaxies, nebulae, and black holes. Ancient civilizations operated on a human scale: the body, the landscape, the visible heavens. Yet their understanding was profound, guided by observation, pattern, and reflection. The difference lies not in ability, but in context. Vision is always relative to the observer's needs, desires, and understanding. The story of glasses is ultimately the story of synthesis. Ancient curiosity plus modern invention equals expanded vision. Human imagination plus technical precision equals both clarity and wonder. Observation plus reflection equals wisdom. Ancient civilizations never invented glasses, but they laid the foundation for understanding why such tools are meaningful. Their absence was not a deficiency, but a deliberate rhythm of perception, a balance between seeing and knowing, between light and shadow. As we near the final batch, we recognize the continuity of human aspiration. From sand, obsidian, and quartz to lenses, telescopes, and fiber optics, the pursuit of vision reflects a single enduring truth. Humans do not merely seek to see. They seek to understand, interpret, and connect. Glasses are a tool, not the essence. Clarity is valuable, but perspective, cultivated over centuries, is priceless. Vision bridges the past and present. Ancient civilizations teach patience, humility, and imagination. Modern tools teach precision, scope, and innovation. Together, they form a continuum of human experience, a story of light, shadow, curiosity, and responsibility. The ultimate lesson. Seeing is only the beginning. Understanding, creativity, and ethics define the true legacy of vision. And now, after tracing the journey of human vision across millennia, from the unassisted eyes of ancient civilizations to the modern marvels of lenses and digital optics, we arrive at the final reflection. Vision is a story of humanity, a story that blends curiosity, necessity, imagination, and wisdom. Ancient civilizations never invented glasses, yet they saw the world in ways both practical and profound. They observed stars, rivers, crops, and the passage of time without optical aids. They relied on patience, intuition, and collaboration. And in doing so, they cultivated a vision that was not only of the eye but also of the mind and spirit. Their understanding reminds us that limitation can be a teacher. Imperfect sight can coexist with perfect perception. Today, humans have extended their vision beyond natural limits. Telescopes pierce the cosmos. Microscopes reveal life invisible to the naked eye. Digital networks capture, record, and display the world in unprecedented clarity. Yet clarity alone does not guarantee understanding. The tools we invent must be tempered by reflection, ethics, and imagination, the same qualities that guided ancient civilizations. Seeing is inseparable from human nature. We desire clarity, but we also crave mystery. We seek knowledge, yet we thrive on imagination. We extend vision with instruments, yet wisdom is cultivated in the mind, heart, and community. Ancient civilizations teach us that balance is essential. Vision without reflection risks arrogance. Knowledge without humility risks error. Close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath. Imagine the sun rising over the pyramids. Hear the rustle of scrolls in a Greek library. Feel the gentle wind over a Chinese observatory as scholars chart the stars. Even without glasses, they perceived more than just the physical world. They perceived meaning. They perceived connection. They perceived time itself unfolding. Glass eventually arrived. Lenses, spectacles, telescopes, microscopes. It enhanced human sight, extending the eye's reach and refining perception. But it did not replace wisdom. Every lens, every polished crystal, every modern optical instrument carries within it the legacy of ancient curiosity and reflection. From sand to glass, from obsidian to fiber optics, the human desire to see persists, tempered by the lessons of history. Let your eyes soften. Let your mind wander. Seeing is not only about clarity of vision. It is about understanding what truly matters. It is about patience, imagination, and humility. It is about knowing when to look, when to wait, and when to let mystery remain. Ancient civilizations remind us that some things are best appreciated not through lenses, but through observation, reflection, and reverence. Human vision, aided or unaided, is a continuum. From the first polished stone to modern microscopes, we participate in a story that spans millennia. Every generation inherits curiosity, observation, and wisdom. Every generation adds its own chapter of invention and insight. And in that continuum, glasses are merely a tool, not the origin nor the destination. Take a deep breath. Feel the world around you, the air, the light, the textures, the shadows. Imagine the ancients gazing at the same sun, stars, and earth without lenses, yet understanding its rhythms. Imagine the present, where vision is limitless, yet understanding still requires reflection. You are part of this continuum. Your sight is both physical and metaphorical. Your perception is shaped by history, experience, and imagination. As you breathe slowly and deeply, allow your mind to rest. The story of why ancient civilizations never invented glasses is not just about optics. It is about the human journey of perception, knowledge, and wisdom. It is about the balance between clarity and mystery, between seeing and understanding, between light and shadow. And now, as you hold that story in your mind, let the weight of history settle softly, like sand through fingers, calm and steady. Close your eyes. Take one final deep breath. Feel the rhythm of time stretching across centuries. Feel the legacy of human curiosity, patience, and imagination. Let your mind wander gently through the ages, resting in the quiet understanding that vision, aided or unaided, is a gift, a responsibility, and a connection to all who have looked before you. And with that, the story ends. Not with a closing, but with a quiet reflection. A soft pause in the continuum of sight.